You're listening to Deal Closers, brought to you by websiteclosers.com, a show about how to build your e-commerce business to be profitable, scalable, and one day even sellable. I'm Jason Gillikin, and on the show today, Website Closers Isaac Porter and I talk to two brothers who turn their skepticism of big government and the dollar and turn it into a seven-figure exit. Let's talk a little bit about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin specifically. As I record this, Bitcoin has dropped from 30,000 a month ago to about 20,000 now. Over the past 5 years, though, Bitcoin has increased from about 2,000 to 20,000 with a high of 64,000. If you can handle the swings, a 10x increase over a 5-year period isn't so bad. For those of you who, like me, before I record this podcast, don't know a whole lot about what Bitcoin is, it's a decentralized digital currency that can be transferred on the peer-to-peer Bitcoin network. And keeping track of your own Bitcoins and keeping that information secure is why you need a crypto wallet. For brothers Bryan and Colin Aulds, they found that crypto wallets weren't amazing and they could do better. We'll get to that. But first, we start with growing up. Bryan is 4 years older than Colin, and although they didn't always get along, they both had a love of business. Here's Bryan.
We were both pretty entrepreneurial, but I think 4 years is like the worst year differential that you can have between siblings. You know, as they're growing up, they're like old enough to like want to be around you and think you're cool, but like, oh yeah, you definitely thought I was cool, Colin. Don't make that face. Not old enough to like keep up, and so it just kind of like I was pretty mean to Colin, so I will admit that.
Bryan had a lawn mowing business, and I definitely wanted a piece of that and to help him out with it. And I think my parents basically made him let me help, which much to his chagrin. But yeah, I tried a few different things. I tried like a snow cone stand on the deck of our river house as people floated by, but man, that flopped horribly. Yeah, I would say I didn't really have much success on the entrepreneurial end until I hit college. You know, I started throwing some parties, and I would charge like a $5 per cup to enter the house, and then you got as much beer as you wanted. But it was probably illegal, frankly. But you know, when you're in college, it was a massive success, actually.
It wouldn't be Colin's last success, and for Bryan, his career began in the Naval Academy as a pilot, and that's how he found both his love for logistics and maybe his skepticism for big government.
Like, we knew how much ice cream was going over to the carrier every day because, like, when you were doing ice cream, they would say, hey, this is a load of ice cream. We're going to wheel it out of the freezers, like, right now, and, like, you have to get this load and make sure the carrier's ready for it so that they can get it, because you're in the Persian Gulf, it's like 130 degrees outside, right? So the ice cream's going to melt like that. So as soon as it comes out, you pick it up, you take it over to the carrier, and they wheel it out to the freezer. And so they're like, okay, well, you know, how many picks, how many times, how many grabs of ice cream do I got? And we're like, oh, we got 3 grabs of ice cream, and there's like 8 pallets times 3, so there's 24 pallets of ice cream that are going over. And then, like, you know, that's a lot of ice cream. And then you go down to the galley and there's never any ice cream, and you're like, where is all this ice cream going? And like, oh, well, the Chiefs are getting all the ice cream. Like, because then they're the ones who are actually like in control of these pallets down there. So I don't know, that was interesting. And then another like short story is I'm going to pick up this pallet load of Monster, and out of the top of it, you can see that like the pallet has been cut open and like 4 or 5 cans of Monster are missing. And I guess like the deckhands on the supply ship just, you know, cut it open and grabbed out some free Monster drinks. So
Wow.
And this is telling how much the Navy paid. I mean, imagine like how much you're actually paying for Monster if you're using helicopters to like transport it across the ocean. Like, these are not cheap Monsters.
or ice cream, right? What's the cost per scoop on that?
Yeah, exactly. So
in the Persian Gulf,
the Navy runs on Monster and ice cream.
Don't they serve steak every Friday night to like all of the people in like Iraq when we were still there? It wasn't there.
Yeah.
Like, there's no telling what the cost per ounce for a steak is in Iraq.
They see the thing that you're not hearing, and when you see these like they would serve lobster on the carrier, but I would never eat it because it was like just gross. So like the same thing about the steaks. Like, the steaks are not something to like write home about.
Yeah.
Most of the food is
Still-
actually like prison quality, and it actually says not fit for human consumption. They can't serve those to like the people on the ground in like bases, but on ships it's legal for some reason. So
Oh my God. Okay. Wow. This is quite an experience there. This is good to know too. Wow. Colin, what about you after your worthless college degree? What did you do?
Yeah, well, after college, I learned just how worthless my college degree was. Also it was kind of I graduated, a year or so into the recession, maybe 2, maybe 3, I don't know. The market was still very bad, and if you had no experience, no resume experience for that matter, really, it was very difficult to get a good job, and the only people that were hiring were insurance agencies. So I went and got a job at New York Life. I sucked at it, which is interesting because when you're an insurance agent, it's actually a pretty entrepreneurial job. I mean, you're paid full commission. I mean, you don't make money if you don't sell. And but man, I just hated it. And I was living in Nashville, and I hated living in Nashville. I just didn't. I mean, it's a fun city. It's great to visit. I think of it a lot like I think of New York. Nice to visit, but I would never want to live there. And everything in my personal life was going bad, and I had no prospects. I mean, it was pretty dire, to be honest with you. So I left, and I just like started over. Basically, I moved to Korea, started teaching English, and I met a guy named Ruben Samson there, and he was the leader of the Seoul Bitcoin meetup. I was living in Seoul, Korea, and this was in 2014, and I had been a pretty frequent user of the Mises.org forums, which is Mises Institute is like a libertarian think tank, basically. And I would read a lot of their articles, and I'd be on their forums. And these guys in like 2011 started talking about Bitcoin, and I'm like, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. I mean, who on earth would use this? Clearly, gold is the best money. And I thought it was really dumb, and I shrugged it off. I'm like, man, we're really going the wrong direction here, guys. But then I met Ruben, and he asked me to come to his meetup because he had come to one of my meetups. And so I went, and I really liked Ruben. And Ruben, if you don't know who Ruben Samson is, which I don't have any reason to think that you do, he's now the lead maintainer of the Bitcoin mailing list, which is the mailing list that goes out to all the Bitcoin core devs. So I mean, he's really connected in with the active development scene on Bitcoin, and he's probably one of the smartest people I've ever met, and basically proceeded to explain why I was wrong about every assumption I had about Bitcoin. And I basically left that meetup like a complete believer. And that segues into Bryan and I's first purchase of Bitcoin in 2014. It was right after the Mt. Gox hack, and Bitcoin had just hit a high of $1,200, and it had tanked down after that hack because everyone was panicking. And basically, I mean, it was like, this thing is over with. I mean, that's what a lot of people thought. This project is done. But obviously, Bitcoin's the ultimate honey badger. It doesn't care. It just keeps going. So Bryan and I got in, and that kind of segues out of there. But just to finish up what happened afterward, I left. I met my current wife there. She moved back to California. I moved back to Texas for a little while, and it was like my sole mission to make it to California. So I eventually moved out to California. I got a job working software QA at Panasonic Avionics, and that's kind of where Bryan and I started the business.
Okay. So Bitcoin was at 1,200, and then after the hack, it's down to what? What did you get in for?
I think it bottomed
240,
at, like
340, something like that. Somewhere along in there. I don't remember exactly.
And
but
Bryan,
back then it was awesome because you could just go to Bitcoin ATMs and put in cash, and you could buy as much as you wanted that way, more or less.
So Bryan, what is that call like in 2014 from Colin, where he's like, "Hey, I want to invest in Bitcoin." What are you thinking
Yeah.
then? Are you like, what the hell are you talking about?
Honestly, like I had heard about it like completely separately several times, and kind of had this like inkling in the back of my head, like, oh, that's something I should probably like take a flyer on. And then like, you get busy with whatever else and brush it off. And at the time, like it was, when I first heard about it, it was just a pain in the ass to actually get a hold of. So eh, like the amount of work it would take, it was more than the price you were going to pay for it, right?
It
Like
wasn't easy like it is today to get.
half the price was like your sweat equity in like going out to figure out how to get a hold of it. Like, oh, I'm going to Western Union like money to the Philippines. Like that just sounds like a bad idea, so like definitely it's all going to be gone, right? So you really are taking a flyer that you're actually going to get this, the product at the end
and
of the day.
it's worth noting that like the way that you got Bitcoin was on Mt. Gox, but Mt. Gox had just melted down, and you couldn't get it on Mt. Gox anymore. So I mean that's how systemic that hack was. I mean that was the way that you got Bitcoin. That was the big innovation in liquidity, was Mt. Gox.
Yeah.
It was the first real Bitcoin exchange.
Yeah. And so when it folded, Coinbase was around, and so that was kind of like how Coinbase sucked up its initial big slug of customers in the US, at least. It's kind of like that was the where everyone went. And so I remember, like that my thought process was like, okay, I'll take a flyer on this, but I don't want to invest as much as Colin because I want to, not hurt as bad when it craters and goes to zero. So,
And was that the expectation? Like you fully expected it to go to zero?
Yeah, well, it was like whatever I put in this, I need to be comfortable with like it just disappearing tomorrow.
Which is I think still like that still should be your attitude.
That is true. Yeah. It needs to be an amount that you're comfortable having disappear. Now the chances of it disappearing are much lower now, I would say, than they were in 14.
Yeah, definitely true.
But
it's volatile, but it's at 30,000 now. I don't see it going down to zero like you feel like it could have when it was in 200, 300, right?
Yeah, and you had just watched it evaporate from like a high of like 1,400 down to 200.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So
what happened then? Like, what happened in your initial investment?
Well,
I mean, I think I still have some of those coins. So yeah.
Did it go up quickly though?
No. It grinded sideways for like
years.
Until 2016, early 17.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it might have like doubled in price over those 3 years, but it basically did nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, around 2016, like late 16, early, I think New Year's Day of 2017, it hit $1,000. And so it still hadn't gotten back up to the all-time high again.
Yeah.
That's still a good return on what you bought it for.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. But I mean, again, you didn't put a lot of money in it. Like you would be stupid if you bought,
maybe you put in $1,000.
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
I mean, it's just not that much money. But I mean, to me at that time, it was a lot of money that I put in because I was making almost no money. So, but like at that point in my life, you have to understand, Bryan was doing pretty well in the Navy, but he had a family and stuff like that. But I didn't have kids. I wasn't married. But I had so little to lose anyway. So that there's sort of a power in having little to lose because you can just take these big risks. And it's like, well, it can't get much worse, right? So but it's funny that Bryan and I kind of came to it separately because I think one of the things we didn't mention, one reason that we kind of became buds was because we had both kind of been toying with this I don't know, more libertarian philosophy than we were raised in, and we kind of arrived at it separately. Like I was like, dude, have you ever read this article by von Mises before? And he's like, oh yeah, I have. Like, I've been reading a lot of that stuff. And it's like, I think we were kind of raised accidentally to be pretty hardcore, like libertarian guys, and definitely early Bitcoin selected for that crowd because it appealed to the crowd of fiat money is bullshit and it's just a giant Ponzi scheme, and you know they're just ruining your wealth, and so
the government has ruined our money.
Yep.
And like we need to try to take it back. And so then, like Colin kind of alluded to earlier, the initial idea was that, you know, we'll go back to a gold standard or whatever. And I think like it finally just occurred, like being, I guess, a tail end of the millennial, it just kind of seemed to, the gold thing just kind of seemed to fall flat when you look at the internet and you're like, well, you know, I can't send gold over the internet. And so like, it just seemed like an idea that was more right for its time again. And, like, or at least something that could happen, you know, back in 2014. And it seemed to be getting more and more likely as we go into 2017. So.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing, and the reason it appealed to the libertarian crowd, was that everything up to that point, if you were concerned about the way our money worked, and I don't want to get too political on this because it's not what the show's about, but just to explain the kind of motivation and why we got interested in it. At that time, you know, the only alternative was to go back to the gold standard. And again, like what Bryan said, it doesn't really fit the time. It gets a little bit archaic, but on top of that, it required a massive lobbying effort that was very unlikely to succeed, basically impossible to ever succeed, asking the government to go back to a gold standard. Like, that's just never going to happen, ever. And Bitcoin was it was an escape hash out of the system that you had no choice but to participate in. But if you could bootstrap this other network that competes with the dollar instead of integrates with it, then you're no longer asking for permission. You're just going around the mountain instead of trying to bore through it. So I think that's what appealed to that crowd early on, and there was enough of us at that time to bootstrap the network enough to get it off the ground.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. And so you're into Bitcoin in 2017. When did you think of starting a business centered around Bitcoin?
Yeah. So that's kind of a funny story. Colin, we had kind of a group chat with me and Colin and Ruben and another friend. Actually, all four of us now are podcast hosts on our podcast, the Unhashed Podcast. But at the time, you know, there was no podcast. It was just kind of the four of us shooting the breeze on Telegram. And so Colin post in there like, hey, like if I was ever going to start a business in the crypto space, I would name it Bill Fodl, which is now the name of our product. But at the time, he was just like, he thought it was a funny name because it's like billfold mixed with hodl, with HODL, which
I mean,
its own.
There's lots of wallets. There's lots of wallets in the space, and so like wallet, billfold. I mean, those are kind of the same thing. Like, someone should create a wallet called Billfodl. That's what someone should do that.
So then I immediately, just to kind of like razz Colin, went out and bought billfodl.com. And so like, hey, you can't start this business now because I own the .com domain. And he was a little mad about that. And then we started kind of kicking. This was probably in like, I don't know.
This
like
was
June,
in end of 2017.
Yeah, June of 17. Yeah, mid to late 17. And
so your motivation, though, is you're being a jerk big brother at this point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He's trolling me.
I was just trolling him that I had bought the domain name for his idea. And so then, like, it also around the same time, like, I'm getting out of the Navy, and so I'm having to think about like what I'm going to do when I grow up. And so I'm like, well, you know, there's this other product that like we kind of start formulating this half cocked business idea. So that's kind of the genesis story behind both the name and the idea of us getting into the space.
Okay, so at some point you're thinking like, well, maybe we should actually do this. And there's a lot of wallets out there. Like what problem are you trying to solve when you're starting to do this?
Yeah. So at the time, in mid to late 2017, the crypto market was just absolutely bananas. And so Ledger had launched probably 2 years before, but their Nano S product was just selling like gangbusters. And there was another company called Crypto Steel, who had made really the first steel wallet in the space, I would say. And the problem was that they were making these out of their father's like steel forge.
It's a sword factory.
Yeah, it was like a sword factory. Yeah, in Poland. And there was no way for them to scale up to meet the demand. And so you would go on their site and buy, want to buy a crypto steel, and they'd say, okay, like, and I had bought some in early 17, and, maybe I like purchased like 10 of them or something. And they'd say, okay, like we'll ship to you maybe in 3 months. And then, you'd wait and wait and wait. And eventually they would come, and, they worked as advertised. Right. But like, clearly if the backlog is that much, like the market is saying we need more of these things. And I was reselling some of them on eBay for like, they retail for 99. I'd sell them for $250. Right. So like the market is saying like, we need a lot more of these things. And so like operations background, I was like, I think we can get these made for quite a bit less than 250, and even less than, than whatever the crypto steel is making them for, and also solve for some of the other problems that were with the unit. So that was really the problem that we had set out to solve.
Yeah, I mean, that was the initial problem. And I mean, on top of that, the user experience of the product was horrible. I mean, it was definitely designed by someone who doesn't understand how customers think when they receive your product. But it didn't matter because they were a first mover, and it did what it said it would do. But I mean, there was just so many little things you could make better. The customer service was crap. I mean, absolute dog shit. And so we're like, well, we can do better customer service than this. And the other thing that we were thinking about, like that I just laugh at in hindsight, was we thought it would be so easy to find a supplier for this product. And for us, it was. But I think we got really lucky because we tried to find more suppliers after, and it was like impossible. It was so hard. We eventually found some, but it took like a couple of years to find another one. And our idea was like, let's just sell like 1,000 of these things and make make 20 grand and, move on our way. But then we sold through them and we're like, well, we just sold 1,000 of these. Like, we got to do it again. So we put all the money back in to get 2 or 3 or whatever. I don't remember. It's like, if we buy 3, we can get them for this price. And so then it became, then you start realizing, the issue of scaling that entrepreneurs have, of it just being this baby that is endlessly hungry. And it's like, wow, I've made 100 grand, but I actually haven't made anything because I've re-upped every time. And then that was basically the story almost up until the time that we sold. I think kind of towards the end, we were actually like taking home some pretty fat checks, but really up until 2020, like we didn't make anything, and it was pretty hand to mouth for those years too. But I did want to mention, I think one of the greatest business lessons I got out of this business is how overrated originality is, because when Crypto Steel created this product, they open sourced the design, so we didn't have to redesign anything. I mean, anyone was allowed to take their schematic and go manufacture it or create their own or make whatever modifications they wanted to it. And I think a lot of the time in business advice, they talk about, how having an original idea is so important. I think that's bullshit. I mean, it's nice to be first mover, but there's also a ton of risk involved with being a first mover. Whereas in this case, and I think in many other cases, like just look for a proven market where the market leader is really bad at what they do. And the only reason that they do well is because they're the only guy providing the product. I mean, those are where opportunities are.
For sure. Yeah. All you need to do is solve a problem and you've got a business,
Yep.
right? It doesn't have to be an original idea. It's very rare to have an original idea that would actually go somewhere.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys
And-
invested a little bit in the business just to see how it would go. And then it went well. And then you invested more and it went well. Like, did you have any idea that this could snowball up into a legitimate, full-time job?
I kept telling myself that it was a full-time job, even when it wasn't. And so, I think that might be why we won. And I say win, I say win, metaphorically. But I think a lot of the other people in the market did not have anyone working full time, and it was just like a pet project. And so you're just able to, I mean, it's what you're doing. You're putting at least 40 hours a week into it. Right. So, you're able to just out hustle everybody. And so there were a lot, like we like to joke that the road of metal crypto wallets is littered with our dead competitors. And I think most of them, it was just a pet project for them, a side hustle.
Which is how it started for us. I mean, that was our idea, it'll just be a pet project, but
it'll be a side hustle. And then
you won't sell 1,000 if you do that.
Yeah. That's the thing. And so I couldn't find a job. And so I would just, as I got out of the Navy in 2018, I couldn't find a job. And so I just worked more and more on Bill Fodl. And so that kind of, one thing led to another that way. But I think a lot of it was just hustle. So
can you guys talk about the business model a little bit? You've got a website. The business was primarily D2C, built kind of on a Shopify platform. Like, how did you come up with that as a distribution model, and what other things did you think about as you were building out that, and eventually, leading to an Amazon channel and a wholesale business?
Yeah, I guess I'll let Colin talk about why we chose Shopify.
I think the reason you choose Shopify is because it's of all the big e-commerce platforms, it's probably the most mature. And if you look at any major online retailer of any size, they almost all use it. So you without knowing much else, you just go and be like, well, I mean, who am I to question Fashion Nova or Ledger, or I don't know. I guess the only one that doesn't use it is Amazon because they created their own platform. But I mean, we use Amazon too. So, I mean, they're a little bit different. But so, I mean, that was really the reason we chose Shopify. As
far as the go-to-market strategy, I think, initially we started on Shopify because that's where started on as an online B2C channel because that's what Crypto Steel was doing. And so, we knew that's where the market was. And I don't think there was a lot of deep strategic thought that went into it. It was just kind of
there's none.
This is what this is what our competitor's doing. So clearly it's where we need to start. And then we did kind of like dip our toe into Amazon and have grown that out to be, I guess, an equal pillar to our Shopify store. So it's just kind of like organic growth in all the channels. You just like try something out. Okay, that worked, and then again, you just keep doubling down on what works. And there were plenty of things that that didn't work along the way, but.
So, Isaac, when did you become aware of Privacy Pros and Bill Fottle?
Yeah, so I think we were introduced by Tom Howard in 2021. Would have been kind of in the spring, maybe Q1. Does that sound right, guys?
Yeah, we reached out to Tom, I think, in December of 2020, and just kind of like to get his take on it and to just let him know like, hey. And what's funny is like, we told them at the time, like, hey, like this is going to get really big over this next year. And like, we're going to want to plan on sometime. I think at the time we said like mid 2021, like thinking about an exit. And I think he kind of thought like he looked at our books at the time and was like, kind of, I think he kind of dismissed it a little bit. Like, not that a broker is ever going to, say that out loud, but I think he was like looked at it and be like, guys, like, let's be honest here. Like, you've only done, I don't know like how much revenue we had for 2020, but it wasn't a lot.
It was horrible. I mean, it was nothing.
Yeah, it was probably like $300,000 or $400,000 in revenue. I don't remember, but we saw the hockey stick and we knew what was coming.
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of one thing where someone in the market, not that I have like, telepathic predictive abilities or anything, like it could have turned out totally differently. But the people in the market kind of have like the different feel for it than people externally looking. And Tom was not the only person.
Yeah.
One of our mentors kind of said the same thing. Like, guys, like no one's like, this is peanuts. Like no one's going to care about this kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's not wrong. And it's not a bad impulse to have, but when you've been in this space as long as we have, and you've studied it as long as we have, and again, you don't have a crystal ball, but Bitcoin has had a very, very, a very predictable pattern that has emerged every 4 years. It just shoots up a metric fuck ton, and then it crashes down, but higher than the previous high, and then it goes sideways for a while and goes up and down, and then it shoots up again. And that's just how it's worked out over the past, I don't know, 12 years or whatever it's been now. And at that point, when we came to Tom, like things were starting to heat up, and we were like, okay, we're going to be ready to go here pretty soon. We want to get this in the works, but it hadn't really taken off yet. And so I think it would have been very easy if you weren't super familiar with the space to kind of be like, well, I mean, no one's going to want this right now. And they wouldn't have, but then it did. So
what,
you know what? I don't know, because I thought that our mentor had introduced us, and then I like asked him like the other like later on down the road, like, yeah, like you remember you told me about Tom. He's like, no, I don't even know Tom. So I don't know how I got introduced to Tom, but at somehow, yeah.
Well, I know that story a little bit because I asked Tom. Y'all had looked at a deal that Tom was representing, I think.
That is right. Yeah. That is right.
And so Tom met you through the deal and started talking about your business. And like you said, it was real early on, but we came up with this idea to develop projections and go to market based on the pro forma growth of the business that you were expecting to occur. And that was pretty cool because that's kind of when I came in and we worked on the projections. Yeah. And then you guys just proceeded to absolutely destroy it, for the next couple of quarters and blew your projections out of the water. And I think we raised the price on your deal 3 different times, I believe.
Yeah. Whoa. Well, that was the cool part. Like we priced based on projections, and it seemed like nobody, understandably so. Again, like it's kind of like what we said about Tom and early, especially if you're a buyer though, like, well, great, you've projected this great, like anybody can put something down on a spreadsheet. But then like we kept just exceeding the projection every month. And like, okay, well, this is what we predicted. And like we hit higher than it. And then here comes the next month hit higher than that projection, even though like the projections were growing too, we would still just hit higher. And so
and just to quantify that, I think the trailing 12 months cash flow in the business when we got introduced was a couple $100,000. I don't know the exact number. And the projections, so we were talking 6-figure historicals, and then we were projecting, kind of high 6-figure, 7-figure net income. So like, we were already projecting a 200 to 300% growth in the business, and then they just blew that out of the water.
That's incredible. So when was there interest with buyers? When did that start happening? Or what was that like, I should say?
Yeah. So I think to Bryan's point, when we first went to market on the big projections, and the historicals really looked disconnected from the projections because it was such a hockey stick. I had some pushback from buyers, but then as we went through kind of the first 2 or 3 months and showed the actual performance beating the projections, every day after that, we had more and more buyer interest.
But I think also, and correct me if I'm wrong, Isaac, but I think also the fact that we were killing our projections also made people nervous because they thought, like, are these guys like committing fraud or something? Which, like, anything in crypto looks like fraud because of just how insane the performances are. It's like just dreary or just like the best thing you've ever seen. And so it doesn't really make sense to the average person looking at the books, I guess.
Yeah, there was some skepticism about the growth and just how it was being achieved. I think the other thing that was interesting with your business is you had virtually no paid traffic. You had no advertising expense, and so that looks so different than a lot of the e-com businesses we see have 30 to 60% of their revenue being spent on advertising, and you guys were at less than 1%.
Yeah.
And so not only were you growing at this breakneck speed, but you were doing it organically with a blog that Colin was writing to drive traffic to your site.
Yeah, that's one thing I guess we haven't touched on yet is Colin's magic SEO abilities.
That's part of the story that's got to be told because maybe your business degree didn't pan out, but whatever you learned in SEO is a gold mine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we learned very early on that, and it's such an obvious lesson, yet it seems like people just don't really think about it that often, especially in e-com, is paid traffic is really expensive. I mean, really expensive. And they're also kind of a one and done. I mean, they might come on your website, but they're and they may be fairly high intent, but you don't develop a relationship with or trust with the person, and it's not a long-term strategy. And I think a lot of people think they can just throw money at their problem of sales and it will come. But I think we nurtured a pretty loyal audience, and we wrote like pretty. They were either incredibly useful, like, okay, how to transfer from Coinbase to your wallet. And for some reason, like, no one had written this article. I mean, not well, like maybe some guy in Bangladesh with poor English wrote it and, it just wasn't panning out. But, those are people those are our customers. People who own ledgers are our customers because our product is, if you don't know what a ledger is, it's a hardware wallet. Our product is a complement to that product. And that's a great opportunity right there. And that's free. And it was so easy to get that traffic because no one else had written like a really good article on that. And we did some like kind of investigative journalism stuff that like got us lots of links. I think that those are kind of the two strategies for us: was write really useful content that is like, in 2 minutes, I'm providing value to you in a real way to solve some technical problem that you're having, which is very common in the crypto space. The other content that we would write would be really investigative. So like there was a paper wallet generator that was just stealing people's coins. And, we went through and we hired chain analysis companies to figure out where the coins went and who likely owned them. And we figured out how the scam worked, like on a code level by going into the code. And just figuring out like, okay, what is actually happening on this website when they steal your coins? Like, how are they doing it? And that content doesn't make you money, but it gets you lots of links from really big crypto sites, and that raises all of your money pages. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach there. And I learned a lot of what I learned by working over at Buy Bitcoin Worldwide, which is the largest Bitcoin blog that there is. I had a mentor there that taught me a lot of stuff. And so I just implemented that on our website, and it did really well, and it's responsible for, most of our sales that aren't on Amazon are because of that blog, probably.
So smart. Well, guys, I want to be mindful of your time. So let's get you out of here in like 5 minutes. So what happened with the sale? What can you tell us about that?
Well, you talked about our initial bootstrap investment back in late 2017 was about $24,000, and we exited for 7 figures. So the power of compounded interest, compounded work over time in a business.
Well, plus I'm sure you bought some Bitcoin in that time. Plus being able to invest in all these different other currencies. So I think you're doing pretty well.
Yeah. Well, it was a good first business, I would say. So,
and a couple things I would point out about the transaction that I think are noteworthy. So, we got to a good valuation, and I also thought the deal structure in your deal worked out really well, because we were able to identify a buyer who had, I think, a pretty complementary skill set, and you ended up retaining equity in the business, and you're now working with your new business partner to continue to grow that business, and you guys have started up a new venture that is super interesting. I'd love to talk about that. Can we talk about the new venture as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, and I totally agree with you about the complementary buyer. You mentioned all of our traffic was organic, and he's a paid ads expert, and I think that's what it was going to need to be for an individual, at least, to have that level, that kind of expertise, because that's, like Colin and I had said, that's what our business needed to really continue its growth, and so that's what we got, and we're really excited to be working with him.
I would say if you're thinking of selling your business, and you're having a hard time finding a buyer, like for us, it was hard because our business was such a niche business that a lot of people like, hey, your books look great, but like I don't understand the business, and I don't understand the space. It's just too much of a hurdle for me. I think if you can, and I think also people are understandably afraid when people are trying to sell their business. Like, okay, why are you trying to sell? But if you're willing to retain some equity, it creates it displays some good faith in the business that, hey, I just want to take some chips off the table, but I'm in it with you. I'm willing to go with you. And if you can find a buyer who maybe they don't even have the best offer, but if you retain some equity and they're really complimentary to your skills and they have something you don't have, then you may make more money with that person in the long run anyway, if you're willing to take the ride with them. So I think that's some advice I would have if you're thinking of selling. Be open to those kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure. So
with the new business, go ahead, Bryan.
Yeah, so it's called 10 Net Zero, the number 10, and then net zero, like net zero emissions. And basically what we're out to do is using Bitcoin crypto mining as a tool to help energy producers, it could be oil and gas, monetize stranded or underutilized assets. And that could come in many forms. I think the headline would be a natural gas flare. So if there's an oil well a lot of times next to it, you'll see a flame next to it, and that's natural gas that's just being burned up. And so what our company would do is come out, set up a Bitcoin mine on the process, and use natural gas to generate electricity use the natural gas to generate electricity, and then mine Bitcoin off that electricity. And what that does is it lowers your net emissions by 30 to 60% of carbon CO2 equivalent, because instead of just lighting that CO2 on fire, you send it through an engine which burns it much more efficiently. And so you have the environmental impact and then also the impact on the bottom line. So it's really a twofold prong of attack. And I think as we look forward and want to tackle more of these carbon issues, it's going to have to be something that makes sense economically too. People are only so altruistic. And so having something that can benefit them financially and also benefit the environment just really cements that.
Man, this is awesome. So is this something that you guys have already? Like, do you have one of these? I guess it's a machine that would do this. Do you have many of them? Like, are you?
So we have one site up and working currently, and we're going to be expanding that to right now it's about 100 kilowatts, and we're going to be expanding it up to like 400 kilowatts. And then we're in talks with investors to kind of to scale up from there. So,
wow. So guys, I always ask, what's the first purchase that you made when you sold your business? and it sounds like it might have been investing in your new company, but what's something fun?
It was a convertible note in the new business.
Yeah. Is there anything fun that you bought with the money from the sale of the business?
I bought a C2 rowing machine. So that was my first purchase. I don't know, kind of a small one, but
yeah, I bought a bunch of plane tickets for my honeymoon. So
hey, congratulations!
Cool. Yeah,
thank you.
Where are you going?
Oh, all over Europe. Yeah, we're in like a month in Europe, so it's gonna be
That's
good.
fantastic. Like that's a huge win right there.
Yeah.
Seeing the world. Well, very cool. Well, guys,
if you're in Spain in July, we should connect. I'm going to be there for the month.
Damn.
Yeah.
All right, we'll talk later.
Okay.
Cool.
Guys, this is amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the Deal Closers podcast. I learned a lot, and I can't wait to see what your next company does.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank y'all for having us.
All right, that was Colin and Bryan Aulds. For Privacy Pros and Bill Fottle, head to privacypros.io. And for 10net0, head to 10net0.com. That's the numbers 1 and 0, netzero.com. Check out their podcast as well, Unhashed, which you can find on any podcast platform, or head to unhashedpodcast.com. Thanks to everyone for listening to this episode of the Deal Closers Podcast, brought to you by websiteclosers.com. If you like the show, be sure to rate, review, press the follow button, and share with your network. And of course, if you're looking for help selling your e-commerce business, be sure to visit websiteclosers.com. This episode was edited and produced by Earfluence. I'm Jason Gillikin, and we'll see you next time on the Deal Closers Podcast.